Good afternoon from Cape Town. I'm here together with Caroline Mbugua, Senior Director, Public Policy and Communication, Sub-Saharan Africa at GSMA. Hello, Caroline. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Caroline, you recently launched the Digital Africa Index. Can you tell us a bit more what it means and how it has an impact on the economy and the industry?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. So, from research, we have seen that at the end of the day, in Sub-Saharan Africa, we continue to lag behind when it comes to accelerated connectivity, particularly to mobile broadband services. We continue to have a wide usage gap and a wide coverage gap of 13% as compared to the global average of about 1%. So in this backdrop, and if we continue, and from the research that we continue to conduct, it shows that we will take up to 30 years for us to actually be able to close that the connectivity gap and the digital divide. So in this, against this backdrop, the GSMA launched the Digital Africa Index in the hope that we can be able to provide a tool that governments, private sector, investment community can use to make decisions that will accelerate the adoption of mobile broadband services and be able to reduce the gap in time for the continent to catch up with the digital revolution that is currently ongoing. So the Digital Africa Index comprises of two indexes that are complementary in nature. So we have the Digital Nations and Society Index, and we have the Digital Policy and Regulatory Index. The Digital Nations and Society Index looks at the level of digitalization of an economy in a particular country and ranks that particular country from 0 to 100, helping them understand where they lie in terms of their particular markets. And within this particular Digital Nations and Society Index, we have three pillars. We have the pillar of the customer, digital business, and digital government. And we do believe where these three areas are digitalized, then you can start to talk about a digitized economy. Now, the main reason why the index is critical is because the index provides it provides guidance, insights on the specific policies and regulations that governments can be able to implement in their markets to improve their digital nations and society index rating, because at the end of the day, that's an indication of the level of digitalization in your market.
So it's kind of a blueprint what you offer them?
It's kind of a blueprint that gives you both diagnostics and the solutions that you can be able to put in place that can be able to progress digitalization in your market. So think about it like this. It's almost like giving you a doctor's diagnosis and medication to the issue that you're currently suffering from for better health. So at the end of the day, we are hoping that the two can be able to be the data-driven approach that governments have been asking for to be able to support them in progressing digitalization in their countries.
And the index itself is country specific or is it universal?
So the index is focused on Africa. However, each country gets their own individual rating and can be able to compare themselves against other countries within Africa. So you can be able to limit your search to a particular country and be able to have insights on either East Africa, West Africa, or two individual countries. It's very flexible and easy to navigate because at the end of the day, the idea is for us as Africa on the continent to move together so that initiatives such as the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement can actually work, because we cannot rely on the analog or the legacy technologies such as 2G and 3G to run our digital economies.
All right. So when we look at Africa, so we have also geographically a lot of rural and semi-rural areas. And I heard earlier in our conversation you mentioned the USF report. Can you give us a bit more insights about that and what does it actually mean?
So at the GSMA, we've conducted a lot of research on the area universal service access funds. And this is because it's one of the policy interventions that have been put in place by governments globally to be able to address the issue of connectivity gaps in their particular markets. The USF funds are set aside and put in place to support the rollout of connectivity or mobile broadband services in rural and underserved areas, particularly because majority of these areas are considered unviable by the commercial entities because of the high cost in rolling out service and very low returns. It is estimated from our reports that it would cost up to 3 times higher to roll out a site in the rural areas compared to the urban areas, and the return on investment is significantly lower. So at the GSMA, we commissioned this report and launched it in October 2023, and it looks at the policy interventions that can be able to make USFs more effective. And this is because in the development of the report, we did a survey, and this survey we surveyed both policymakers, regulators, and also the private sector, and we did this for over 40 countries in Africa. And within this survey, there was almost like a unanimous decision that, or unanimous agreement that USFs in the region are underperforming, meaning that the objectives that they were supposed to meet in the first place are not being met. It means that funds are being collected, but they are not doing the job it's supposed to do. So the report comes out with certain recommendations, 11 of them, that are outlined that policymakers can be able to just focus on them to be able to improve the effectiveness. If I can highlight a couple of them. So number one is having clear objectives of the USF when developing them, because this will guide the areas of focus once the USF is in place. Having a data-driven approach in determining the contribution rate is very critical. And this entails doing a complete access gap study that we're able to understand the areas of where you have gaps, and then having a model that demonstrates how much it will require to cover these gaps, and then that can go into determining the contribution rate for the different contributors, and understanding that mobile operators are the major contributors of the USF. Another area that I wanted to highlight that is critical in the management of the funds is using a data-driven approach in the decisions or determining the USF projects. So these are some of the policy recommendations that have come up, and these are some of the areas that we are working with both mobile operators and government to be able to see these recommendations implemented in Africa for effective management of USFs.
You earlier mentioned the underperformance. And when you say you make recommendations, you must know already the reason why it underperforms.
So majority of the challenges when it comes to the underperformance of the USF is the management of the fund in the first place. There's no clarity in how the fund is managed, and for that reason, then a lot of the stakeholders would rate it as underperformance. Majority of the funds that are available on the continent, the funds are collected, and we don't get to see annual reports that be able to demonstrate exactly how the funds are being used and with the projects that are being rolled out. So lack of that visibility and clarity is a major determinant, or is a major leading factor in USF underperforming, because then you're not able to monitor and provide feedback on the impact of these USF projects. So one of the recommendations as well was, can we have a periodic reporting of the USF funds on the continent, helping people understand the funds collected, the projects that they have been utilized for, and of course having that clarity around the funds available within the USF.
So we could say that they probably miss a long-term strategy when we talk about management issues, or?
A lot of the times you will find that in the development of the fund, the objectives are not clear in the first place. So when you don't have clear objectives, then you're creating them as you go along. And if that's the case, then it slows down your effectiveness and efficiency of actually running this fund. A lot of the times you also find that the teams or the authorities that are managing the funds would be either understaffed or poor resource in terms of even building capacity and so on and so forth. So there's also need to build capacity within this within the organization to be able to effectively manage the USF. But having clear objective of the fund is a first line of defense in terms of making sure that the fund actually meets these objectives at the end of the day.
So when you produce this kind of reports, like the Africa Digital Index and this USF reports, do you think there's the maturity is there in the governments to really understand the bigger picture? Or is it more like we go to 10 other conferences and we talk a lot and it has almost no impact?
I think what we would say is that political goodwill is the only ingredient from government that is required to make sure that we can be able to actually implement some of these recommendations that we make. In the countries where we have seen strong political goodwill in driving digitalization of economies, we have seen more of these policy recommendations implemented in those countries as compared to where we don't see political goodwill. So at the end of the day, it's for people to understand that without digitalization of economies, economic growth and development is not guaranteed in Africa. Because if you look at other developed markets, the more digitalized they are, the more they continue to grow. And this is purely because when you think about the technology sector or the telecom sector, we need to move away from looking at it as an independent sector and start looking at it as an enabler of other sectors. Because at the end of the day, the problems you have with universal healthcare, education, financial inclusion can all be fixed by technology. Yeah. So where you have governments that prioritize political goodwill, prioritize policy reforms, then you start to see technology permeating through different sectors for us to have increased value, not only contributed by the ICT sector, but also increased value from the other sectors in terms of contribution to GDP, increased productivity, increased efficiency in running businesses, so that at the end of the day, the value, the output out of it is much more valuable.
But which also means that they must stop to think about a pure revenue stream when they look at the mobile sector.
Yes. They're thinking that the mobile sector is a cash cow and it's easy for us, for there to be a collection of revenue is one that we need to move away from it and start looking at the mobile sector as a development partner and to see how mobile connectivity, once it's adopted and it is once it is adopted in the various sectors that we are talking about, how it can increase the growth, even leading to increase of revenues for government because of increased tax collection from the different sectors, increased efficiency in the collection of government revenue, reducing revenue leakages, utilizing technology. So that is a mindset that would like to see that shift towards seeing the sector as a development partner as it is. The sector is not extractive, it is more of a development focused.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for the insightful conversation. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
That was Tech Africa News. You can find more on techafricanews.com.